All right, so our next speaker is Josh Price, who you will you may see at CodeBEAM if you're going, CodeBEAM America. I believe he's doing some Ash training there. So
Yeah, thanks,
cool.
Eric. Hi,
Yep, go ahead,
everyone.
Josh.
Um, yeah, I'm not sure how long this is going to take, so I'm going to try and keep it under 25 minutes. There's a lot to cover. What we're going to talk about is smarter software apps with Ash and GenAI. And yeah, let's get stuck into it. This is me. I'm from Sydney, Australia. Those are my dogs. I like hiking. I've been doing Elixir probably nearly 10 years now and liked it so much I founded Alembic, and we've been doing Elixir for 8 years now. I think it's nearly our eighth birthday. So yeah, Ash I discovered probably about 3 years ago, and we've been loving that ever since. All right, so what's the plan? So we're going to do a quick Ash overview, just to cover the basics. There's a lot there, so um, you might want to think about coming to the training if you want the in-depth guide. Then we're going to walk through a sample Ash app just to see what it looks like. And then we're going to look at just how tool usage happens in LLMs, specifically look at Model Context Protocol, which is very new. It only came out a couple of months ago. So I've been playing around with that, and I hope to share what I know so far. There's a fair bit to it, and it's evolving quickly. And then we're going to connect some LLMs to our Ash app and see how we can utilize the introspectibility of Ash, uh, and reveal that to the LLMs. So then we'll talk about a little bit about what's next. So this is kind of a work in progress. So Ash really is here to solve this problem. You want to build a new app, and it's the stuff above the waterline on the iceberg. But look, what you end up having to build for a modern web application involves all of the things below the waterline, and it's a lot. And so, really, I run a consultancy. We're building lots of different projects for clients. We all want to focus on the stuff that's important and core and, valuable, which is the things above the waterline. But yeah, what comes along for the ride is all of the relatively boring solved commodity problems, that we've done before, yet we have to reinvent the wheel a lot of times. And, I would argue that most clients see that stuff as pretty low value. Um, a good example of that is sort of authentication logging in. Most clients that we talk to don't even think to specify that as a feature, or a super admin screen. Interface to their application is pretty much table stakes for any modern web application. And yeah, there's a long list. And yeah, anything below the waterline, if we're spending lots of time down there, it's kind of waste. And look, there's a lot of those things. Admin UIs, observability, security, all that kind of stuff is pretty important. And one of Ash's goals is to, keep you focused and working on the innovation stuff above the line and less so below the line. So not reinventing the wheel. So yeah, that is the problem that Ash is trying to solve. We're modeling your domain, and we're deriving the rest. We'll see what that looks like. So what is Ash? We've spent 3 years trying to craft this message. Um, it's a bunch of things, mainly a declarative application framework. So this is not a web framework. This is for applications. We can expose your application through a variety of different interfaces, web being one. So we use Phoenix to serve up our web UIs and our GraphQL and JSON APIs, but it doesn't have to be. And in this case, we'll see that we're doing something non-web. So it's resource-based. So those are the nouns of your system. Um, like I said, we're agnostic of UI layer, but we're also agnostic of data layers. So we can change out data layers in smart ways, which is quite cool, leveraging the power vector. And just going back to the iceberg metaphor, we're mainly focused on modeling your domain model and your business logic. And anything that isn't in support of that, we're trying to avoid the busy work and boilerplate of that. Um, Sorry, I slipped. So we're using DSLs everywhere, so that's pretty important. We'll see some examples of that. And the big idea is that we represent your system once you've declared it using the Ash DSLs. It becomes an introspectable structure. So that's pretty much the big idea. Remember that. We'll cover it again. And then from that data structure, we can introspect that and derive pretty much anything you can imagine. And so we'll see some examples. So remember the big idea. We've got a DSL that you write, and basically that's an internal Elixir. Better examples later, but yeah, DSL turns into a data structure. Ash does that, and then we introspect it, and we can generate lots of other bits and pieces. This is another way to think about it. We're doing work in the application layer, the red layer in the middle, and then we're deriving, ways to present our app to the world. You know, Ash Phoenix helpers. We can generate an admin interface directly from our domain. We can generate APIs. And like I said, we can swap data layers. So I'm not going to cover that today, but that's kind of the model, is that we're trying to keep all of our business logic and our bits and pieces inside the application layer. So this is a pretty simple Ash resource. It's a user. We are talking to a Postgres data layer here, and we are exposing this out in GraphQL. And like an ecto schema, we've got attributes here that we've defined, and we've got relationships to other resources in our system. So pretty familiar stuff. This is the kind of thing that you can basically introspect. This is the data structure. So when we ask for the attributes of the user, we get a data structure that looks like a bunch of structs. So this is what we're going to use later to generate and expose our capabilities to LLMs. So actions in a resource represent all of your app's capabilities. That's pretty important, and they can be simple or as complex as you like. They can get pretty complex, but they can start pretty simple. And effectively, we can expose those as GraphQL. We can expose it as an open API, JSON API. Or code interfaces allow Ash to basically write the code that you would write yourself. And I think, there's very few cases, I'm not aware of any, where it can't just write the code for you because you've declared it. It can just write your interface, which is pretty cool. So model your domain, derive the rest. That's hopefully the short and sweet explanation of the kinds of things that we're doing with Ash. So yeah, maybe we're talking to LLMs. This is one of the things that we can derive. So let's jump into that. I think it's important to sort of step back and look at, what, regardless of your stance on LLMs and GenAI, it is a transformative technology. It may not be perfect yet, but it's a pretty good tool. And I think it's transformative no matter how it plays out. So what could the future of software look like? I think we can build much smarter platforms. We've certainly got the tools and the ingredients to do so. We have yet to see all of that play out yet, but what if your software could, just talk to you? We've got multimodal interfaces. And I would argue that when we build applications and application UIs, really the user didn't ask for, the things that we give them right now, like the web app or the mobile app. They just wanted to answer some questions and do things, through the system. And so there are other potential interface ideas that LLMs kind of bring to the table. And so one of the big things that, if you've used Claude or Perplexity even, you've got a fairly linear conversational and dynamic interface rather than a fixed static UI. So that's one of the big differences. I think if you can talk to your app, then do you even need user support? Because the app can help you get to bits that you need and understand the capabilities of what you want, rather than poking through a static UI that may not be able to find things easily. Um, what if the app can help you navigate it? And look, there are some things that we can do on the sort of more meta and stakeholder side with Ash as well. If you write the documentation in your declarative DSLs, you can have that flow through to all of your APIs, and we can generate diagrams, um, architectural diagrams and so forth. I'm not going to cover that today, but we can do all of that stuff now. We've got pretty regularly, clients that need apps that are multilingual, and translating things is something that LLMs is pretty good at for most common languages. And so doing that potentially on the fly, if you need to, some of the things. Now we can sort of touch on some of those powers, but Ash knows everything about your application, and it's all represented as data, which is pretty powerful. And Ash kind of is your application if you remember the red middle layer of your three-tier architecture. So what kind of cool stuff can we do? Let me just pause here for a sip of water. So there is a book out through PragProg, which is now in beta. And I don't know if you've probably seen it if you subscribe to PragProg. But that is selling quickly, and so check that out. The reason I mention it is because we're going to use the application Tunez, which is the app that you're going to build during the process of reading that book. And so it's a relatively simple app, but it's, sort of non-trivial. We've got artists, we've got albums, and a web application to interface with that. But we're going to kind of look at the code quickly and just look at how this is constructed and what the domain is. So what we're looking at here is the music domain. All the domain is, you can think of it like a Phoenix context or a domain in the domain-driven design sense. In the Ash sense, it's really just a grouping of resources, which are the nouns of your system. So artist and album here. And what we're doing here is defining through code interfaces the code for our actions in our artist and our album resource. So these are all the actions that we're going to be interfacing with through an LLM. So that's the music domain. This is the artist resource. Now, apologies for the wall of code, but what you can see is, a relatively complex Ash resource. There's a bunch going on there. I've collapsed the GraphQL and Postgres and JSON API sections, but they, explain to Ash how to expose this out to the world. The actions there are just the description of what to do in each of those actions. So we've got reads, all the CRUD stuff, and we've got a search which can either take no args and return everything, or search by name. It does pagination as well by default. We've got the attributes up there, so we've got IDs, names, biographies. We've got the previous names of the artist, and some timestamps there. Another important thing, because it comes up later, is authorization policies. This is who can access what on your resource. And just a quick tour of this. We want admins only to create artists, and anyone can read it. It says always authorize for reads. For updates, we want to make sure that only admins and editors can update, and destroying is an admin only thing. So having all of your authorization built in with a neat DSL lets us navigate that. All right, so let's talk about tool usage. OpenAI arguably sort of had the first real version of this. They called it function calling. And what it really allows you to do is to have the LLM understand what the functions are it can call. And if it needs to call a function, it basically returns the JSON data structure so that you can read that and do the things that you need to do, whether that's fetching data like the current weather, or performing actions, calling APIs, modifying state, all that kind of stuff. And so this is how you define tools to ChatGPT. It's pretty similar to how MCP works, but yeah, like there's a schema for how to describe a function, what the name of the function is, what the parameters are. And the idea is that the LLM will understand, what tools it has at its disposal, and it will try to use them when it thinks they're relevant. And so Ash AI, if you saw Zach's talk at ElixirConf last year, he did a quick demo and he's published Ash AI. So this is code you can go have a look at. There is only one file and there's about 500 lines of code if you want to go and have a look at how this works. It's pretty, if you don't know Ash, it's pretty hard to understand, but it's doing the introspection and it's doing the integration with OpenAI. So go check that out. And yeah, really, it's pretty experimental. Check out the talk. There's a demo right at the end of it where he demos this with a Twitter app. And yep, like I said, uses OpenAI function calling. And it isn't actually an extension. Yeah, it's not actually an extension yet, but it does expose all the actions. But what it's doing is preserving all the security in your authorization policies, so that only the right users can do stuff. And it's basically implemented as a in console text-based interface. So some of the issues with it is it's dependent on OpenAI, which is a proprietary and hosted API. You can't run ChatGPT locally. There are some limitations around how many tools you get access to. And I think the limit is approximately 64. So if you need more than that, look, it's possible that all of the descriptions for that won't fit in their context window and it will struggle to choose which tool. So there are some limits around that. Yeah, like there's a simple prompt in there, but I think in the examples I'll show of how this works in practice, I did expand the prompt to try and get it to give you a sense of what it's actually thinking and what it's doing. So we'll see that in a second. So by default, you can't see the reasoning, but if you prompt it appropriately, you can get it to, explain the tool choice and explain what it's trying to achieve. And so what you can't see is the results that come back from the LLM here that it gets from the tool call. And yeah, the results vary. It's not perfect. And so I think if you're going to have an LLM connected to your, important application, for a toy thing, it's fine. But for production usage and, like a real app that could do potentially irreversible or critical, dangerous things, you definitely want this to be correct, and you don't really have the time or patience for hallucinations. So, this is still experimental. Definitely not ready for prime time or production. But this is how it kind of works. So I've customized the system prompt. There's a default one in there, but what I've added is just describe the tool calls that you're doing and describe your thinking. What I've done is I am a user here, and that's the actor that we give to Ash so it can respect all of the authorization policies. So I am just a regular user here. And then in the console in Tunez, so I start this up with my OpenAI API key and I start up Phoenix with a console. And then I just start the chat. And I've passed in the prompt up there, the actor, and I've just said expose all of the artist and album actions. And so what I've done is sort of asked it, what can I perform? And it's come back with all of the tools. So, in the code, we've exposed those tools to OpenAI and it understands it pretty well. And it's using all of the information around, the name of the thing, the descriptions, if you've got them, etc. So that's pretty neat. Then what can we do? So I've asked it to show the first three artists, and you can see the database queries that it's actually running there. It selects all of the artists and limits it to 3. And it's grabbing all the attributes that we've defined in Ash. So we get all of the artists, the first three artists, which is pretty cool. Zombie kittens for the win. So that's using the search function and reading our artists. Now, what I tried here was to create an artist. Now, if you remember the policies, only an admin can create artists. And so what it's done here is described the fact that it's got a you're forbidden, you must be an admin to do this, so your action was denied. So that's like a pretty useful thing if you're exposing your application to the world. If you aren't authorized to do a thing, then you don't get to see it. Now, what may be useful down the track, and we can talk about this at the end, is basically making an agent role so that you can explicitly guide what's possible for an agent, and you give the LLM some kind of agent role. But once I've made myself an admin, I can get it to create stuff. So you can see it going in. I said create a punk artist, so I didn't even specify the data, and it's basically created the punk brigade and given it a biography, a revolutionary punk band challenging the status quo, pretty punk. And you can see the query where it's inserting into artists there based on calling the create action for an artist. And it's giving me some thinking around that. So it's telling me the artist doesn't have any albums, and it's completed. Well, great. So I said, in flow here, add their debut album. And because we're in the conversation, it's using that context of what we just did. And it creates Rebellion Rising, a pretty appropriate punk album name. So released in 2025. It's given me some sample data for an album cover, which obviously doesn't exist, but we'll live without that. So that's creation. So, this is Ash AI. You can go check this code. You can try it on your Ash apps if you're brave, and you can follow the instructions. However, what we came to talk about was MCP. This was, like I said, released really recently. It's a standard open protocol for, connecting LLMs to data sources and applications and so forth. It's currently, JSON RPC over local standard IO. And Claude Desktop, it sort of has this built in that we can talk to Olama. I haven't done it, but yeah, there's some videos online that talk to that. Look, it's a big ecosystem and it's moving pretty quickly. So it's likely to be, here for the long haul, I think. There are other options, but we probably don't have time to talk about that today. So there's three sort of ideas in the architecture. There's a host, and that in Claude's context is Claude Desktop. It could be Z, I think, supports this as well. And then it has a client that keeps a connection open on, basically as a standard IO socket, and then talks JSON RPC over that to a MCP server. Now, it is local to the server, but you can actually proxy that to remote stuff. And this is what it looks like inside Claude Desktop. And so I'll show you how to configure it, but this is it when it has been set up. We can share, we've got the Tunez Ash MCP server there, which I've configured on the next page. So I'll show you that. And then it tells you what tools are available. So this is already a lot more instructive, and you can see, which server is serving what kinds of capabilities or tools. So that's pretty cool. And all you have to do is go to this text file and add your MCP server, and you just have to give it a command with some arguments to start the standard IO server. So this is the demo when you're using it in Claude. I've asked it to list the artists from Australia, and it's actually, figured out that it can add the query parameter, and you can see viewing the result from music artist search. You can see what action it's called from which server, and yeah, it tells you what the results are. So it actually does the search here on the results because we're actually not respecting the arguments yet. So it's actually done a blend of doing a query and then the LLMs doing extra work to actually search for um, Australian bands. And interestingly, here, the word Australia does not appear in those biographies. It's actually inferred Melbourne and Australia. Claude just knows. So that's pretty clever. Because if we do that in Ash AI, it does not work because Australia doesn't literally appear in the biographies. Um, so we've asked for their albums, and this was even more surprising. This is working on a relatively prototype version, and all we got here from the album read was the cover image URL. We weren't actually returning the relationships. And what it's done is by reading the cover image URL, which contains the band name, it's figured it out, which is kind of surprising. So it's figured out the bands for the albums for those bands, which is pretty cool. Then it's got the full biography. Um, wall of code here, but very quickly, this is the extent of the MCP server code. We're using Phoenix JSON RPC as a library. And then effectively, on the left side here, we've got the introspection of, we're going through all of the domains that have the Ash MCP server domain defined on them. And we've got all of the resources and all of the actions. And then we're just exposing that as an MCP tool definition in JSON RPC. And then on the right side, we've got what the call tool looks like. And down at the case statement, we're just saying for a read, we are basically doing the query and encoding results of that query as JSON. So relatively simple. And this is how we define that Ash MCP server in our Tunes app. So all we've done is just added that to the extensions for the music domain, and we've got a very simple MCP server, just basically, having enough to say grab all of the actions or not. And this is how we define an extension DSL on the right. So just conscious of time. So what are the challenges here? MCP right now is limited to standard I/O, but it can proxy to remote services like we saw on the architecture diagram. Look, I think there's a big bar on correctness and high trust, even for non-critical actions. The way Zach wrote Ash AI, it's got various ways of doing filters and pagination and so forth, that make it tricky for the LLM to sort of navigate even a simple list and read and filter and so forth. We really only want to expose access to non-critical functionality. I mean, Ash gives us the power to do that using various mechanisms, so that's useful, but really we don't want to be exposing dangerous actions without checks and balances. Look, I think we haven't explored just what it looks like when you have a lot of actions and a lot of tools available to an LLM. It may potentially get confused about what it can call. With low numbers, look, Claude's pretty good, and so is OpenAI. Look, understanding the various deployment models about where your LLM is going to be a challenge as well. This is all sort of local for now, running locally, but yeah, deploying this for a production system, certainly need to look at. And we want to make sure that this works for lots of different LLM models and model types. And potentially, if you have a long conversation, the context window will be exceeded. And if you've ever seen the context window be exceeded, it starts hallucinating pretty hard. Look, the models are working on ways of solving that, but it's still a problem. There's only so much context window, and it starts losing some of that context pretty fast. Cool. So what's next? I think we want to solve enough of the challenges to make this useful in production. MCP servers is an evolving spec. So right now we've just looked at prompts, but there are things like resources. Sorry, we've looked at tools, but there are ways to prompt it more generally and to give it resources like to the data resources. I haven't looked into that yet. Not every host supports that. And on their roadmap, there is authentication via OAuth 2 and remote access sort of being more first class and native. I'm planning to take the work I've done here and release a real version of Ash MCP server. So that's not quite ready yet, but hoping to progress that over the next few weeks and months. But yeah, like I said, check out Ash AI, read the code. It's 500 lines. It's pretty dense, but it's instructive of how this kind of stuff can work. Would love to have your feedback. It's pretty interesting stuff. So yeah, I'd love to try out the swappability of MCP with different models via Llama or other mechanisms. And then I think taking, once we've got something useful, putting this as a live UI for something, not super critical, but for like an admin interface, just being able to type stuff rather than poke around is kind of helpful. So just see how useful that might be. Um, and then, yeah, we want to focus on correctness, security, and safety. And so some of the ideas are, well, if you're doing an action that might be irreversible or not advised, you might want to have a conversational confirmation step to just be sure that I'm about to do this. Are you sure? Um, or even, maybe not doing the action, but helping you navigate to the right part of an admin UI or part of your app to get you to the point where you can do that. So that could be useful. And yeah, lots more testing and feedback needed. All right, so that's pretty much me. I've gone over a little bit over, but here are the resources. There's the Ash website, the code on GitHub. You can find Ash AI as one of the Ash projects on GitHub. And yeah, if you haven't already, join the Discord. Do pick up the book if you're interested in learning more about how to build those apps. The Tunes app is one of the things you'll be building, so you'll understand how all of that works through that beta book. I've read it, it's pretty great, and people are really loving it. So I've had great feedback so far. And if you want to know more, there is a training day on the 5th of March at the start of CodeBEAM. So if you want to join us, I believe Barbara has a discount code for us. So we'd love to see you there. If you know some Elixir, that's all you need to get started with Ash. And we've even had people in previous trainings where they've done Ash for a long time for their work, for in some cases years, and they still learn a ton. So it's sort of something for everyone. And we're pretty excited. Looking forward to it. That's me. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Josh. I know we're low on time, but I don't know if there's time enough for a question or two.
Yeah, happy to take questions if we got a bit of time. I see Heiko's got his hand up. Oh, no. Did I miss any messages in the chat?
I've got a
Oh,
question, Josh, if that's okay.
yeah,
Do
go for it.
you, um, when are you doing the first release of the MCP Ash project? When? Before CodeBeam or around CodeBeam or
I think the best answer to that is when it's ready.
okay.
Um, the code's pretty simple. It's really about just making sure we can expose all of the bits. So yeah, look, even if it's
What
rough,
was the what
like
was
an
the
initial
sort-
code now.
what was the RCP JSON RCP library that you're using for your foundational work?
Good question. It
Did you say
is
Phoenix, JSON, IPC?
PHX Jason RPC. I'll drop it in
Yeah, please. That'd be helpful to get
the
me.
chat.
Yeah, on the just on LLMs, I think um, working out how to use them in a non-deterministic way is the key.
Yeah, there was an intentional choice to not do this live because they honestly, depending on the model, the answers are somewhat random.
Yeah, they're always different.
Non-determinism is our future. And so look, that's probably one of the big challenges to get past is you need to prompt this carefully and use the right model so that this is actually effective and safe for whatever you're trying to do. And, that is probably very dependent on your use case. But yeah, don't be giving the LLMs the tools to do
No,
crazy with your data, please.
bank account.
Yeah, I don't think we're ready for that. But yeah, look, I think we are moving into the era of agentic workflows and agents being able to do a lot more stuff with the ability to use and reason about tools. And I think that's pretty exciting. So look, expect more in this area this year.
Yep.
Great. Well, thanks for the talk, Josh.
No worries. Thanks for joining, everyone. Barbara, did you have that discount code?
Yep.
Oh, all right.
Are you able to see my slide?
We can, yeah.
Okay, so hold on. Just need to move this. Okay. So I'm not gonna take too much time. Not gonna bore you, but wanted to just invite you to CodeBEAM America. If you haven't been, it's a 2-day 2-track event. We have top keynote speakers like Sean Moriarty talking on LLMs and native systems, Chelsea Troy on fault tolerant, machine learning operations. So lots of keynotes about AI. We also have Fred Herbert and Charity Majors to talk on team performance. So lots of Erlang, Elixir, Gleam Talks, Phoenix, LiveView, testing, messaging, database, and a lot more. I just mentioned a few here. There's always hallway track where you can meet new friends, talk about technologies that you love. And this year we also have roundtable discussions. So it's a 40-minute slot on both days where we have roundtables on the topics that some of that we established before the event. But as attendees, you can also create your own table, submit a topic, and have your own discussion. So as example, as the ones that we already established is like embedded, open React, adoption, technical depth on Beam, and a few others. We also have a day before the conference, as Josh already mentioned, 2 tutorials that I also invite you to join. It's the one that Josh is running with Zach, Supercharger Elixir apps with Ash. And the other one is Grisp, that's run with Pierre Streetsinger, where you can get a Grisp board. And as it was mentioned before, I do have a discount code for both things, a conference and tutorials, because those are separate tickets. And a 20% discount. The password is Beamsters. You can type it down, but we will also be sending you that code if you registered for the webinar, which most of you did, with an email and with the recording of this session if you missed anything, missed the beginning or missed the ending. So I hope you'll be joining us, and thank you so much for today. Thank you, Josh and Brett, for doing those talks. It was amazing. And I hope it will give you like a glimpse of what the conference would be about.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you, and see you
Thanks,
there.
everyone.